All right, excellent, guys. So we are here to talk about really interesting use cases for location data. Ad targeting can be or is a valuable thing to do, but there are also a lot of other quite neat things that you can do with location data, which is what we're here to talk about. So before we start, I'll just kick it over to you guys to introduce yourselves and who you are, what's your deal, and how location data is involved with what you do or powers what you do. I mean, obviously, you are from Waze, so that is everything, but we'll start this way. So, Brian?
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Brian Dallesandro. My deal is I head up data science and BI at Zocdoc, which is a doctor directory and booking app and website. Being all things data, location data isn't necessarily everything to us as it is perhaps at Waze, but location does play a big part in our marketing strategy and marketing and product strategy. So it's you can't separate it from how we think about the business.
And I'm Mark Risis. I'm head of global data partnerships at Watson Advertising. Watson Advertising is a new brand. We used to be called The Weather Company up until a few months back. The Weather Company is now part of IBM and part of Watson Division, and hence we felt it was necessary to embrace our Watsoniness and become Watson Advertising. The Weather Company, as a consumer brand, trades in weather data. It's a value that we bring to millions of consumers every day and millions of businesses every day as well. And one of the interesting benefits that we receive is that consumers are extremely willing to share their location data so they can get the most accurate weather and so they can get updates as they move about their day. If the weather changes, if there are changes that affect their evening commute and things like that. So while we started on weather data, we inevitably became deeply involved in location. And interestingly, weather is fundamentally a location-based construct. There is no such thing as national weather. Like, it's inevitably localized. And so we have this incredible, healthy feedback loop between providing weather and receiving location in return.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Sheethal Shobowale. I manage the business analytics team at Waze. As Allison mentioned, by the way, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. As Allison mentioned, location data is in our DNA. We're a community real-time mapping app. How many of you use Waze? Ever heard of it?
Oh my goodness.
Okay, so maybe I don't need to go through the basics, but speaking of weather data, we actually do have a weather targeting, so it is very localized and very cool in that respect. But what we do, my team, what Waze does is we're a navigation app. We try to save you 5 minutes every day. And even now we have a new product called Carpool, where we're actually trying to, I guess our original mission is to outsmart traffic. Hopefully we can find you quick ways to get around and save you those 5 minutes. But even now, as we launch a new product called Carpool, we're actually trying to alleviate traffic by taking cars off of the road. And that's a really big, awesome bet for us, which I think should help alleviate some of the problems we're having in all of the big cities around here. How many of you took the L train to get here? Okay. Good luck next year.
Good luck soon.
Even some of the ways we use our data, we actually have a lot of partnerships with cities and transit authorities. We have a partnership with the Port Authority, with the Los Angeles Transportation Authority, and many other in Sao Paulo and Ghent and lots of cities around the world. And one of the things we try to do is help with traffic mitigation. And we even joined a hackathon where we actually, with the Port Authority, to try to figure out some solutions for that. So our team works with data for internal use as well as external. So we, as I mentioned, our partnerships with advertisers, with agencies, with broadcasters, with, as I mentioned, the Connected Citizens program with transit authorities, as well as even event organizers and venue locations, like Madison Square type of teams and things like that, where we even map the parking lots and all this kind of stuff. We use this data to improve the way that our app works and give business insights to our partners, as well as learnings internally to improve our product.
Excellent. Well, before we get into some specific examples, do you feel like marketers are open to embracing the more like experiential sort of use cases for location data beyond kind of the low-hanging fruit of ad targeting? Do you feel like they are kind of ready to bring that on board?
So I think it varies definitely across the board. And when I think about location data beyond ad targeting or even ad attribution, it's hard to separate the concept of location data with your mobile strategy. Because to me, the biggest differentiator between generally your web properties and your mobile properties is that mobile has the power to capture location and use location context to kind of drive the experience. So certainly a lot of marketers or advertisers, I mean, if we think about marketers, there's a huge spectrum of how smart or how good their mobile app is, right? And sometimes I've seen situations where the mobile app is just kind of a copycat on the transactional system of the web experience. So it's like, yes, I can purchase anywhere, but you're missing out on the fact that I'm purchasing from a specific location. And so to me, that's the key. You need to really have your mobile strategy well-defined, differentiate it from your general web strategy. And this is generally more on the product than the marketing side, although mobile is generally a high driver of engagement or re-engagement, so that typically does fall under a marketing purview. But if you don't consider location as the primary differentiator of your mobile experience, then you're definitely missing out, I think.
Well, you have something to say?
Yeah, I was just going to add, from our perspective, I agree there is a spectrum for sure. The challenge we find with marketers looking at location data or information derived from location data outside of targeting or measurement is they don't value it the same way. And in turn, it becomes a challenge for those that trade in location data, that manage collection, curation, and translation from a raw signal to something that the marketer can really use, is that there's an expectation that all that is a value add of some kind. And in fact, I think where you're going is perhaps the real value isn't that versus sticking it into a segmentation schema or attribution. I think those are more easily, they fit into things that marketers have been doing for years, so they're able to assign value to it, whereas the rich insights that you can glean about real world behavior and movement patterns and things like that, I think only maybe investment houses are really valuing that kind of an insight at that kind of scale, and marketers are looking at it as give me some insights and maybe at some point I will monetize that through those more legacy channels like targeting and attribution.
I mean, that is actually one of the kind of cool use cases you hear investment houses trying to predict foot traffic somewhere before an earnings call, something like that, which is interesting. But you both brought up product and how you maybe can use location data to improve product. So what are some examples you're seeing of that in play? Maybe you want to start?
So, well, I actually wanted to touch upon something
sure.
about, we have a lot of partnerships with our clients, and I can talk about product too, actually. Product integration is another way that we are kind of looking beyond just the targeting, because you're singing my tune here when we think of insights and data and analytics as value add. In fact, I think in some ways it's more valuable, but I may be biased in that.
You're the insights gal.
I agree.
Right, they're priceless, and everybody wants them, and it's great for me. I guess I'll have a job for a while, but we have product partnerships, we have integrations, we have two I can mention now where actually product is integrated with our app. We have order ahead. We did with Dunkin' Donuts, one of our biggest clients, and where you can actually order and see when what your ETA is in order to go pick up your favorite donut and your hot coffee and have it there ready for you. We also have, which actually is endemic to Waze, we obviously have a lot of people that have problems on the road. So we have a lot of people in our community and our active user base that are using us to report that they are stopped along the road, for example, or they have a problem with their car. And what we see is actually when we compare the times that people are reporting to Waze versus 911 calls. In fact, we are a few minutes ahead of some 911 calls. So some of our city partnerships are actually using Waze data to get ahead and get the emergency services there faster. And at the same time, we also have product integrations with something like roadside assistance, where we actually have a partnership with Allstate, where they are, share roadside assistance through Waze. So we have a lot of, it's not just targeting, and actually using product integrations is a pretty interesting way of also using location data.
For sure. And I know Zocdoc really, embraces location data to help make the search experience of, looking for a doctor just less, to have less friction. It's something that you've embraced.
Yeah, so, location is both a really cool thing and also a giant thorn for Zocdoc, because healthcare is ultimately a very, doctor offices are small local businesses, right? And so people are only going to go so far. So certainly on the mobile side, location is the primary driver of the search experience to find, a doctor near you. And the obvious things with the app is, as soon as you open it up, we know exactly where you are. So that's one less step you have to do in the search experience. And anybody who runs a funnel probably knows that the fewer points of friction, generally the better conversion rate you get. But on the flip side, what we're actively trying to escape the bounds of location, right? So where this is not just a business proposition, this is something that we hope to actually drive to improve healthcare access to Americans. New York, it's really not that hard to find a doctor. A lot of doctors use it. There's generally a lot of availability. If you need an appointment today, you're going to find it on Zocdoc. If you go further out into rural Pennsylvania, there might only be 4 local doctors within 20 miles, and they accept new patients, but you'd have to wait 4 weeks. That drives people into the emergency room. So that's where location actually is a problem. And we're trying to develop more innovative routes to access healthcare, such as telemedicine, right? You search for a doctor in Pennsylvania, none's available. Well, we can offer you a really highly qualified physician who's part of New York Presbyterian, who happens to be sitting in an office in New York, but you're in Pennsylvania. And as we sort of come up with product strategies and deal with the regulations around them on kind of removing location as a barrier, we think actually we can improve the product as also, and the global benefit of making healthcare more accessible to people. So, we have a love-hate relationship with location.
You love it more though, right? Yeah.
We love it, yeah.
Yeah.
When we have access to it and we can use it, it's great.
Well, Mark, let's talk about what you might be kind of cooking up right now in your location lab. I mean, weather and location are so inextricably linked, and you have done, of course, and do interesting things that are advertising related. It is Watson advertising, but how are you kind of innovating, and what are some interesting things that you might be working on right now?
Yeah, it's a topic obviously that's very central to us, because it's such a privilege to have such trust that consumers place in us, that they're willing to share their location data with us. And so with that comes tremendous responsibility, that we obviously respect their concerns and respect the trust they provide us with. So what we're thinking about is we're very aware of the use cases that we mentioned earlier for targeting, for segmentation. We certainly participate in that. We have a product suite called Journey Effects that is segments built using our first-party data. We do movement insights that look at, if someone is visiting Dunkin' Donuts at higher frequency than the usual, chances are they're actually going to go to a Home Depot on the weekend, because you got to get that coffee before you do the renovation project. And then if someone begins to visit a auto body shop at a higher frequency than usual, or in fact visits one at all, chances are there's something going on with their car, and that's the kind of signal you get from a consumer that you may not see on a credit card receipt, maybe if they pay cash, or maybe they haven't paid yet, but there's an opportunity for brands that have an interest in presenting said consumer with options for auto repair or maybe a new car. They can do that with much more precision and much faster response rate than waiting for another signal to show up that somebody's researching a car. But where we think this is actually headed is how do we factor this incredibly powerful signal, the real world signal, what people tell us with their feet, not with their fingers on keys or filling out surveys or things like that. It's a true signal, right? People fake things on surveys. They don't fake what they do with their feet. You're not going to run into a certain store if you don't have some intent to get
really
something.
Weird, but yeah.
Most people, maybe some do. And so the way we think about it is it's a signal that can help us forecast behavior in a very accurate way. And for us, the theme is we've taken all these signals of wind and temperature and the barometric pressure, and we're able to then forecast weather that becomes very valuable to a range of consumers, companies. Can we do something similar to take the intent signal that we get from location, combine it with other data that has been collected, obviously in a privacy compliant way around consumers, what they bought, obviously their demographics, other things that we may know about them, and forecast, predict what the behavior might be, and in turn align messaging with that. Because we believe that creates a healthy cycle with advertising. If advertising is relevant and if it's served at the right time with the right frequency, not too much, not too low, but just right, that actually provides value for consumers. It helps them navigate their options. It helps the consumer make choices faster and hopefully the more accurate choice for them. And so we're leaning on the broader capabilities within IBM and Watson to weave that narrative of take what we've seen people do in the past and hopefully be more accurate than not in trying to prognosticate, predict on what they will do, and then provide that as an option, a higher level intelligence for media and advertising to make their own decisions on as far as where they invest their money, how they invest it, and how effective that is.
I mean, Sheethal, I feel like that is music to your ears. That's, the insights-related stuff that Mark was talking about.
Absolutely. We have a similar type of insight that we share with our partners, for example, where people go next, and we do, with using driving behavior, where people are actually navigating to. So I wholeheartedly agree with you that people can't fake where they're driving to. And for example, we'll see, I'll start with a serious example, but we see that when people are in this do-it-yourself mindset, they'll go to a home improvement store, and we'll also see the higher likelihood to go to a place to buy electronics or to buy things that are, for the home. Home services stores. So you see both fixing and buying, home improvement go hand in hand. That seems obvious to you, seems obvious to me. Another obvious example, but also shows us that our data actually does show that we know drivers, or we know what's going on in the world, is that we see that people during Memorial Day, we see huge spikes to beaches and these obvious things that we see that are fun, amusement parks and outdoor activities, and we see people are driving more, which means they need more gas. So we do see, fuel increases to fuel to gas stations, and we also see, for example, that fuel is the most spontaneous category. So when you stop, you just stop at the nearest gas station. More likely to use category search to find your gas station as opposed to a specific brand because it's a commodity and you just need the closest one. Particularly if you're on vacation, which is we're coming into our summer season, for example. We see a lot more driving, a lot more road trips, and we see a lot more people going out to restaurants, to bars, to places, that local businesses obviously care and should want to be on the map and should want to should help show consumers that their lights are on. A funny one that we start with the obvious ones, and then let's talk about the not so obvious ones. But what we do see is that after people go to the gym, we see them more likely going to fast food restaurants.
That makes perfect sense to me, by the way.
You're hungry, you go to the gym, you want something to eat. You wish they would go to Whole Foods and get some healthy food, but we see more upticks to fast food. We actually see that gym navigations are increasing in January, for example, right? People are trying to get back on track. But we even see that fast food increasing in December, so they're getting their last, their last food in before they start maybe their New Year's resolutions. So we see what the world is playing out, in our data, which is really exciting because we can do some really fun fun things with it, but also just give a lot of business insights, not only specifically towards targeting, but even what's the product strategy. Should you have if you're more likely a restaurant that consumers go to in the morning, maybe you want to have an afternoon strategy, so you want to know what other competitors are winning out in the afternoon. We can tell you that with our data. We can segment what types of what types of places people are more likely to gravitate to in clustering and in segmentation you mentioned. So there's a lot of really fun things we can do with our data, of course, on a privacy, totally anonymized, aggregated. We're very careful with privacy, but even within all those constraints we have, we can find some amazing insights for your businesses.
So privacy. So we should talk about privacy a bit. And there's always this balance between, because you can, should you, and, Brian, I know that that's something you think about. You are, restricted by HIPAA, of course, and you were explaining, to us before, that maybe, closing the loop is something you could do. Like, did somebody show up at a doctor appointment, but that could be a violation or just something you might not necessarily do. So how do you think about striking that balance between stuff that would be maybe valuable but you can't necessarily do or restricted from doing?
Yeah. So the fortunate things about explicit government regulations is that
I've never heard anyone say that.
well, they give you clear guidance on what you can and can't do. Right. HIPAA creates a lot of constraints and for most of the marketing community, now there's GDPR, which may or may not be that clear, but at least someone will publish some set of constraints. Well, it limits what you can do, but at least like where the black and white, where the line is. When you go into the world of just data ethics and transparency, there is no clear rules, so you have to sort of navigate that with your customer base, like what can they tolerate. And for us, obviously, being at a doctor's appointment, you might think your annual checkup at your primary care is no big deal, but if you're going to a therapist once a week, or some specialty that suggests a deeper issue, HIPAA aside, like that's a very personal, private thing. And so when we think about, there are certainly use cases where we can improve the mobile experience, like compliance, making sure that you are going to your follow-up visits, or actually, if you're in the waiting room 20 minutes early, publishing something to your mobile app saying, here's some information about common symptoms, or, just reading material that's relevant to you at that moment. For us, the way we navigate it, outside of HIPAA, it's more the contract with users, is to do a lot of user testing and a lot of transparency. And so, this might be something that's different than standard marketing practices, because usually marketers are somewhat separated by various degrees of technology away from the consumer. But since we're interacting directly with the consumer, we can publish our exactly what we're doing with the data if we're going to use it, do a lot of focus groups, talk to people, get a general sense, and we have a pretty large user research team to understand the psychology of people around this type of data, how many people are comfortable with it, and things like that, and just have very clear opt-in or opt-out practices.
Right. I mean, that's really the key thing, is the opt-in and the opt-out, and that's what GDPR is about. It's very consent-based.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. That clarity from sort of a guideline standpoint is important, but also you have to balance it with common sense and decency. Frankly, one of the kind of unwritten postulates that we operate under is don't do creepy shit, I guess.
Trademark, yeah.
It's like right there, because that doesn't serve the marketer any long-term benefit. In fact, it usually kind of goes the other way when consumers start to suspect that, wait a minute, there's too much, optics into myself, into what I'm doing. Where is this information coming from? Questions start coming up that may have nothing to do with, where it happened. And we learn a lot about this because obviously we have a sales team in the field, and they often come from, meetings with clients and a lot of healthcare conversations, where they come back and say, well, this company is offering this capability. And it's like, we'll follow somebody into the office and we'll follow them for the next 2 weeks after they went to their doctor, and we know what kind of doctor they went to. And it's like, why would you do that? Like, that's wrong and possibly illegal and all kinds of cocktail. And so we observe this, but we certainly steer on the conservative side, because I think in the long run, that's the healthy way to extract value from information, both for the consumers and for companies that need that information to power their business. And so there's a lot of temptation out there to veer off that path. So one has to be a little vigilant and quite disciplined to make sure that you kind of stay on the path.
I mean, if you have to ask yourself, is this creepy? It probably is.
It most certainly is.
Creeptastic.
And I think this is another reason why marketers should be more proactive about their mobile strategy and location, because if it's your owned property, you control the experience, and so you can build in the transparency, opt-in practices. Whereas if you're doing location-based advertising, there's multiple agents and intermediaries in between. You're just putting up a bid request, right? And then someone else is optimizing that for you. So you don't necessarily control the kind of concurrency of the ad and the context and the media. So there could actually be creepy experiences being created that you didn't necessarily explicitly authorize because you're not controlling the whole chain of events.
So we have about 4 minutes left, and I think that's a good time to talk a little bit about the future and like what interesting innovations we might see. Some like within the parameters of don't do creepy shit. That aside, what are some cool things we can expect? Some interesting things that maybe are nascent now that are on the horizon. Just cool use cases for location data that we'll expect to see soon.
So for us, something that I think we need to hit a certain scale to do this, but similar to Google Trends, like when they had the Google flu, we have access to what people are, like people search for medical care, right? They search for diseases, they search for things that they might have. And the difference between us and Google is if someone is searching for Zika virus on Google, they might have just heard about it in the news and want to get more information. If they search for it on Zocdoc, they probably have it, or they think they have it, right? So we can start to get basically public health trends and watch them be very localized, watch them spread, right? People in this area are searching for Lyme disease more than other things. I mean, we already see this with allergies. We can see where you can basically watch weather and blooming patterns across the country by when do the allergist search spikes start to happen. So, with scale, you can get amazing precision around locality. And, for us, I want to actually start being able to create like a public health data set to work with the Googles and the CDCs of the world to understand healthcare trends and how healthy Americans are.
Not that healthy.
For us, it's really trying to make sure that we make the data that we're collecting and our partners are collecting, again, used in the right way, but it is all for us pointed to this notion of being anticipatory and being anticipatory in a way that's very personalized. Again, we manage the data in a very aggregate way, very anonymized way, impersonal, but we also want to make sure that we offer the consumer the choice that if they want to opt into something that is more recommendation based, that if they say, hey, tell me when I should go do something, or provide me recommendations when I'm in the vicinity of something, or I'm searching for an alternate way to get somewhere, make it easier for me to navigate what is increasingly an exploding number of choices for them. In the real world, in the virtual world, the choice is just overwhelming, and navigating that choice and doing it in a way that is again, not just whoever is paying the highest bill, but really what's right for the consumer is kind of the North Star we're aiming at. And I think location data brings an incredible dimension to helping answer that question. So we look forward to bringing more capability that, again, is more anticipatory and more forecast accurate.
So maps used to be pretty static, right? You used to put them in the pocket of your car and look at them, and you would be very hard to reroute, for example, if there was something going on the road. I mean, our community, not real-time mapping, that's really changed like mapping, right? I mean, the road is closed, there's a traffic jam, those are alerts. I mean, our community is super, to go back to the privacy and, our user base is most important to us. I definitely have gotten some requests for data that I say absolutely not, never doing that. We have to make the rules of engagement there. But our community is extremely important to who we are and making the map work. Next, I would say for us is the community in the car. So imagine, maybe you can close your eyes for a second and imagine this. You're in a car, there's no driver, driverless car, you're carpooling to work. There are 4 of you. And have you ever gotten the alert that says, uh-oh, you're using Waze while you're driving? If you've ever sat in the passenger seat and you have to say, I'm a passenger. Well, imagine when everyone's a passenger. You can change your music, and there's all kinds of stuff you can do, right? You can meet your future husband or wife maybe in your carpool ride, share a coffee at your curbside that you picked up on the way. So I can imagine so many things and integrations. We have one with Spotify now where you can change your music seamlessly. I can just imagine so many of those more interesting things you need at the moment as a community together in the car. Hopefully less cars, so there's less traffic and everyone has a nice ride, but hopefully we can also improve driving for folks and, what we say, outsmart traffic. Now we're trying to end traffic. So.
You've painted a beautiful picture of the future. So on that note, thank you for joining us on stage, and I hope you found it enjoyable. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison.